Doggy, listen what the general tell you now. Okay, listen. Tennessee at Georgia is the biggest game in the SEC this weekend. It just is. Doesn't matter if that makes you mad. This is the marquee game in the SEC this weekend. What was the marquee game last weekend? Georgia and Auburn. Again, I don't make the schedule. I mean, this just is what it is. That was the biggest game of the weekend in the SEC. Georgia on deck again this weekend. The biggest game again, taking on a top 15 ranked Tennessee team. Guess what the biggest game of the week is next week, though? Georgia again on the road at the Gumps. Boy, I can't wait till next week. But let's slow down. Let's worry about this week. We got Tennessee and Georgia. You got Florida going on the road to take on Texas A&M. And speaking of Alabama, Nick Saban and the Gumps got to take a trip to Oxford. All aboard the Lane train. They take on Ole Miss. We're going to talk about those games and the rest of the games coming up this weekend in the SEC in today's video. We're going to do it right now. All right, I see all your comments. I know you want to see General Valtard. I love General Valtard. You love General Valtard. Hell, even the Tennessee fans love General Valtard. But I've been telling you for over a year now. He died. He's dead. Georgia State and BYU back-to-back losses were too much for him to bear. He's no longer with us. Can he come back? What do you mean he's dead? We've seen him in some videos. Yeah, you've seen his ghost in a few videos. Try to pay attention. You can see right through him, for Christ's sake. It's clearly a ghost. If you really want the general to come back to life, I've told you what has to happen, okay? The Valtards have got to beat one of the three big conference teams on their schedule. One of it, doesn't matter which one. Could be this weekend, Georgia. Maybe it's down the road when they play Alabama. Maybe it's the end of the season when they host Florida. But Tennessee has got to beat one of those three teams before the General Valtard will come back from the dead, grace us with his presence, and make another video. That's just what it is, okay? I know you miss him. I miss him. You love him. I love him. But it is what it is. That's what's got to happen. All right, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. And yes, some of them are watchable. Quit telling me in the comment section that none of them are watchable. That's just not true. A few of the videos I have made, listen, how many videos do I have? 3,000 or whatever? Some of them are watchable. Just admit it. This one, I don't know. Judge this one if you want. Tell me this one's not watchable. Quit showing up in the comments and telling me they're all not watchable. That's just not true. Some of them are watchable. Just like always, all the numbers I talk about in today's video are going to come straight from the site over at www.betnow.eu, and they're all accurate as of about 2 o'clock this afternoon. Visit www.betnow.eu. They'll take care of you for all your college football gambling needs. I've been lucky enough to work with the good people over at BetNow for the last 3 or 4 seasons. They've given me a promo code that I can let you guys use too. So if you're new to the site and you get signed up over at BetNow, enter the promo code Uncle Lou and they'll give you a bonus on whatever you deposit. That's Uncle Lou, one word, all lowercase letters. Good luck. All right, up first we got the Florida Gators traveling to College Station to take on Texas A&M Aggies. 12 o'clock on ESPN, and Florida's a 7-point road favorite in this one. Texas A&M has been disappointing to me this season, even by Texas A&M standards. You go back to their first game, they barely beat Vanderbilt 17-12. Vandy clearly one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the SEC. And then last week they got absolutely boat raced by Alabama. No real shame in that. Alabama beats and boat races a lot of people, but you know, every year with Texas A&M, it just seems like it's the same thing. They recruit in the top 10 every year, multiple top 5 classes. Jimbo Fisher, they're paying this guy basically $100 million, like $8-9 million a year. They're not paying him that much money to get beat by every ranked team they play. And that's what's been happening. You go back to last year, they were 7-5. The cadet tries to tell you, yeah, we were 7-5, but we lost to 5 good teams. We lost to Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, LSU, and Auburn. Okay, yeah, you lost to the 5 best teams you played, but breaking news, when you're in the SEC, you're going to play 4, 5, 6 good teams a year. It's just going to happen. Every once in a while, you got to beat some of those teams. You can't be 7-5 and then use the excuse, yeah, but the 5 teams we lost to were good. It just doesn't cut it. You got to beat some of those good teams. Do you have to beat them all every year? No. But if you play 5 top 20 teams, can you beat one of them? I mean, that would be a huge improvement for Texas A&M. They've just been extremely disappointing. This is the strangest line of the week to me. I don't understand this. Florida has looked almost unbeatable, at least on offense, through their first 2 games. The Kyle-to-Kyle connection Trask to Pitts. No one's figured that out yet. And honestly, I don't know if anyone will. They've got two playmakers on the outside, and Trayvon Grimes and Kadarius Toney. Their running game, well, they've struggled running the ball. But, look at LSU last year. LSU didn't put up great rushing numbers either. If you can throw the ball and score 50 points a game, maybe you make the argument you don't really need to run the ball. We'll find out for Florida as the season goes along. Now, Florida's defense has been a little suspect this year. A lot of their fans upset with Todd Grantham. They didn't play well the first week out against Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. And maybe you say, well, new coach, new scheme. Lane Kiffin really knows what he's doing offensively. It was hard to prepare for that game. No real surprise there. But then you come home last week and host a South Carolina team, and you beat them by 14 points, 2 touchdowns. The game was never really in doubt, although you didn't cover. I think you were an 18-point favorite. And the worrisome part, if you're a Florida fan, has to be in that game, Florida's inability to stop the run. I mean, week 1, you got lit up through the air by Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. Week 2, it seemed like you couldn't stop the run. At times in that game, particularly in the first half, when South Carolina made up their mind they wanted to run the ball, there was nothing Florida could do to stop it. Nothing. Now, in the second half, Carolina stayed behind by 2 and 3 touchdowns, and they had to go to the air a lot more, and that was sort of the end of that. And I'm not here to tell you that Florida's got a terrible defense or the worst defense or anything like that. But if you're like me, if you're a Florida fan and you're like me, you're always looking at where your team needs to improve. Georgia's been a pretty good team the last 2 or 3 years. I complain about them constantly. There's always somewhere where you can get better. For Florida, the defense has to be at least somewhat of a concern, I would think, if I was a Florida fan. Now, the good news is the cure for whatever ails you in the college football world is playing Texas A&M. Florida's ranked, which means there's no way they lose this game to Texas A&M, right? Texas A&M can't beat a ranked team for the life of them. I don't know why this line is only -7. It was -6 at one point. Now it's up to -7. That's a little bit better. But honestly, don't you think Florida's at least 2 touchdowns better than Texas A&M based on what you've seen this year? When you see a line in college football or any sport really that looks this wrong, a lot of times it's a trap. Now, I'm not saying this is a trap. I don't know what's going on here. This line looks wrong to me. If I'm going to get this game wrong, though, it's going to be because I got tricked. I'm taking Florida and laying the 7 points. I don't understand why this line's not somewhere between 14 and 17. I get it that they have to travel. Weather's not going to be an issue. It's 88 degrees and partly sunny in College Station on Saturday. 10% chance of rain. Hurricane moving the other direction. I don't understand this line. I'm taking Florida and laying the 7 points. All right, also at noon on SEC Alternate Network, you have LSU at Mizzou. Now, this game has been changed. This game was supposed to be played at LSU, but like I mentioned a minute ago, there's a hurricane moving up through the Gulf Coast, expected to make landfall, I believe, Friday. And so they have moved this game from Baton Rouge to Columbia, Missouri. So instead of a road game for Mizzou having to travel and play at LSU, LSU's got to pack up due to traveling and head to Missouri. Now, when this game was scheduled to be played in LSU at the beginning of the week, LSU was favored by 3 touchdowns, 20.5, 21, 20.5, depending on where you looked or what time you looked. With the announcement that the game has been moved to Missouri, the line has dropped all the way down to -13.5. I would have bet LSU at home -3 touchdowns. I'll still bet them on the road minus less than 2 touchdowns. Missouri might be the worst team in the SEC. It's them or Vandy. Or maybe you throw South Carolina in there. Point is, they're not very good. I know LSU got shocked week 1, taking a beating to Mississippi State, and then Mississippi State goes out last week and loses to Arkansas. And if you're like me, you're scratching your head trying to figure this out. Okay, what's the deal here? LSU gets basically ran off the field, ran out of their own stadium by Mississippi State. That same Mississippi State team turns around, gives Arkansas their first SEC win since 2017, trying to figure this thing out. I don't know what happened week 1 with LSU. And maybe if LSU and Mississippi State played again, Mississippi State would still win. I don't know. But I don't think what we saw week 1 out of LSU is the real LSU team. Now, I've been saying all offseason LSU is not winning the SEC or even the West. They're going to take a big step back this year. You just lost too much talent to the NFL, including Joe Burrow and then your offensive coordinator, Joe Brady. I didn't expect LSU to go 10-0 or even 9-1. I did not expect them to look that bad week 1, though. I'm not buying it. I think LSU is a lot better than what they looked week 1. Again, I don't know what happened. I don't know if they spent too much time celebrating their natty in the offseason and weren't ready to play. I don't know what the deal was, but I'm not buying that LSU team. I do think they're better than that. I think they go on the road at Mizzou, even though this game has sort of been turned upside down, swapping locations from LSU to Mizzou. I think LSU is definitely 2 touchdowns better than Missouri. Give me the corn dog, lay to 13.5. All right, and the third noon game they're giving us this week, and my God, this is punishment if you have to watch this. 12 o'clock on the SEC Network, 2 terrible teams. South Carolina at VANDY. South Carolina's a 13.5-point road favorite in this one. South Carolina, close, but not close enough against Tennessee. Hung around with Florida last week, didn't have enough to get the job done, losing by 14 on the road. So they're starting 0-2. Vandy clearly 0-2 as well. Loser of this game may not win a game for the remainder of the season. Now, they still both have to play Mizzou, and I think Mizzou's a pretty bad team too. But the loser of this game is likely to go winless in the SEC, I think. South Carolina at Vandy. South Carolina, 13.5-point favorite. I like what I saw from South Carolina's running game last week, and their quarterback has actually surprised me, this Colin Hill. It was a head-scratcher to me why they even chose him to be the starter over Helinski. I know they brought Bobo in from Colorado State to run the offense, and he's familiar with Colin Hill. It just was hard for me to understand that decision. But after watching South Carolina play for the first couple of weeks, he hasn't been terrible. Now, he's not going out there and setting the world on fire, but I don't think anybody expected that to start with. Again, ground game here. I think South Carolina controls both lines of scrimmage in this game. I think they limit Vandy's possessions by playing keep away with that running attack that South Carolina has. I think they can win this game by more than 13.5. I like 3 favorites in a row here. That's usually not a good sign, but give me South Carolina, lay to 13.5. All right, in the game of the week in the SEC, 3:30 on CBS, Tennessee travels to Georgia in what will be Tennessee's biggest game since they beat Indiana in the Who Gives a Shit Bowl to end 2019. Now, yes, Tennessee is an improved team. They may have the best offensive line in the SEC. They definitely have a top 3 offensive line in the SEC. Their defense has played okay, but not great. Garantano, okay, but not great. He hasn't turned the ball over. He hasn't made too many boneheaded decisions. He's protected the ball. Their ground game is clicking with Eric Gray and Ty Chandler. They're riding high, 8-game win streak. Is that what it's up to now? The longest win streak in the SEC. They're riding high. Tennessee needs this win in a bad way. Tennessee needs this win in a bad way. They're desperate for a big sort of program-defining win, a win that they can sort of plant their flag in as the turnaround point. Now, you got to give them credit. They're past the point of losing to terrible teams that they should beat. At least it appears that way, right? If they weren't, they wouldn't have reeled off now, I guess, 6, 7, 8 straight games, most of which were against SEC competition. So the days of them losing to Georgia State and BYU and Vandy and whoever the other 2 worst teams in the SEC are, whatever, those days appear to be gone. And that is a step in the right direction for Tennessee. I mean, let's just be honest. It did not start out well last year. As bad as it started out, though, they did get it turned around and they finished pretty strong. They come into this game with their highest ranking in a while, top 15, depending on which poll you look in. They are an underdog, of course, of 12.5 points. This thing started as about a 14-point line and has come down now to 12.5. That's where I keep hearing something. Anyway, Georgia, of course, also 2-0 on the season, a win on the road to start things off against Arkansas. Very shaky in the first half of that game offensively. Got things figured out there late in the second quarter and rolled to a 37-10 victory over Arkansas. Week 2, they hosted Auburn in a top 10 matchup. And as usual, when Georgia has played Auburn over the last 10 or 15 years or so, Auburn just was not prepared. They didn't have the talent. They didn't have the lines of scrimmage, and they weren't able to hang with Georgia. They weren't able to do anything offensively. Neither team Georgia has played has been able to do anything offensively. Georgia's given up 1 touchdown on the season so far. The defense has only given up 8 points per game through the first 2 games. We give up 1.8 yards per carry to Auburn. Now, this will be a much tougher test on the ground than Auburn was. Auburn has a suspect offensive line and doo-doo running backs. Tennessee has a great offensive line and more than capable running backs in Eric Gray and Tyson Chandler. It's supposed to rain, and by rain, I mean pour in this game. Who does that benefit in this game? I'm not really sure it benefits either team. Both of these teams, I think, are okay to sort of slow this game down to a halt with a bunch of run. If you go back to last year, Georgia played a game in the Kentucky, a game at home in the rain against Kentucky, and we were scoreless the first half of that game. Jake Fromm was terrible. He couldn't get a grip on the ball. Second half, we sort of relied on the running game, scored 3 touchdowns, and won the game, I think, 21-0. It might have been 21-7. Won it easily in the second half. But again, another one of those situations where Georgia decided really only to play one half of football. If Georgia decides to play one half of football in this game, it could get ugly. I don't know that Georgia can beat Tennessee this year playing one half of football. Now, that's not always been the case. Tennessee's been a pretty bad team for a lot of years over the last 10 or 12 years, and Georgia could sort of get by just going through the motions against Tennessee, just kind of out-talent them in the end. Even go back to last year's game, really. The game was, I don't know if you say it was close, but it was a competitive game, I guess, in the first half, and Georgia pulled away in the second half. I think Georgia's going to have to play a complete game here. I'll be curious to see how Stetson Bennett does in the rain. Will Georgia really even attempt to throw the ball in the rain after how bad it went last year? I don't know. I have no clue whether or not Stetson Bennett can or can't throw in the rain. We have no body of work to look at in terms of past experience playing in the rain. Will we see more than one quarterback from Georgia? Again, I have no idea. I have a pretty good feeling Stetson Bennett will get the start again, and I have a pretty good feeling if he does well, he'll stay in the game and we won't see any other quarterback. Biggest question mark really is how long of a leash does Stetson Bennett have? And that has, I think, less to do with this particular game than it just does our offense and Kirby Smart in general. How bad will he let it get before he makes a change at QB, if it even gets bad? Now, Stetson Bennett has played great in his first 2 appearances this season, coming in relief at DeJuan Mathis against Arkansas and then getting the start against Auburn. He threw for, 250 yards last week. He's yet to have an interception, so he takes care of the ball. Appears to be getting Georgia in and out of the right plays. Georgia's run game looked good last week after struggling a little bit against Arkansas. James Cook, Kenny McIntosh, Zeus, and even the freshman Kendall Milton looked good this past week. James Cook is banged up, but let's be real, nobody feels sorry for Georgia's running back situation. We got plenty of talent back there. Key to this matchup, I think, the lines of scrimmage. Tennessee, like I said, one of the best offensive lines in the SEC. Georgia, probably the best front seven in the SEC. This will be a great matchup in the trenches when Tennessee has the ball. Similar when Georgia has the ball. Georgia's got a great offensive line too. Tennessee's front seven, I don't think, is at the level of a UGA, but they've got some okay players, most notably that Henry Toa or whatever the hell his name is. I don't understand what the hell is going on here. But anyway, what do I feel about this game? Last week, I actually picked Auburn. Not to win, but I took Auburn in the points. Georgia was a 7-point favorite last week. I took Auburn in the points. I thought Georgia would win by 3 or 4 points. They blew them out, 27-6. This week, Georgia's a 12.5-point favorite, and I feel the same way. I think the rain is going to slow this thing down. I think it's going to be one of these knockdown, drag-out, 20-17, 21-14, 21-20, 24-20. One of these types of games. That's honestly how I feel. I try to shoot straight down the middle on these preview and prediction videos and not, get too over the top with the homer stuff. I do think Georgia wins the game somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 points. But this is Tennessee's best chance in a long time to get the win. I know they beat us in 2016, but it's definitely their best chance since then to get the win and snap that 3-game losing streak. I'm going to take Tennessee in the 12.5. I think Georgia wins a close one. All right, 4 o'clock over on ESPN, you got Arkansas on the road at Auburn. Arkansas got its first SEC win last week since 2017, knocking off Mississippi State. Auburn, of course, took a beating at the hands of my Bulldogs, 27-6, where they were never able to get anything going offensively at all. Bo Nix ran for his life the entire game, and on the ground, they only rushed for 1.8 yards per carry. They got to improve that. They could lose to Arkansas if the offense looks that bad. Now, clearly, Arkansas's defense not as good as Georgia's. I expect Auburn to have a better day offensively than they did last week. Plus, they're at home, and Auburn's a different team at home than they are on the road. They just are. You can look up just their games against Georgia and Alabama. They're 2 toughest teams they play generally most years. Throw LSU in there sometimes too. Auburn, much better at home than they are on the road. They get Arkansas at home. I like Auburn in this spot. I'm not buying the Kentucky hype or the Arkansas hype. Not that they're as bad as they were last year, but people are putting way too much stock in that first half performance against Georgia. That was way more Georgia than it was Arkansas. Georgia had almost 100 yards of penalties in the first half against Arkansas, and defensively we shut them down except for one busted coverage that resulted in like a 60-yard touchdown pass. They did nothing, never crossed the 50-yard line, I don't think, in the second half, and got no points. And then last week they beat a Mississippi State team that honestly looked like it forgot to get off the bus in sort of a sloppy, low scoring, it was like 21-14 type game. I think Auburn is a much better team than what we saw last week against Georgia. Georgia's defense has a way of making a lot of teams look bad. Not that it's impossible to score on Georgia. We've seen teams do it. I mean, LSU lit us up last year. Other than that, nobody really got into the 20s on UGA, though. So Auburn, I think, is better than what they're being given credit for coming off of that bad loss against Georgia. And Arkansas, I'm just still not completely a believer. I still think they're one of the least talented teams in the SEC. I think Auburn rebounds at home, late of 13.5. Give me the barn. Okay, now this game will be interesting to me. The Nick Saban versus Lane Kiffin dynamic is just interesting to me for a lot of reasons. They didn't get along that well when Lane Kiffin was there. We all remember some of those. The camera would pan down to the sideline and Nick Saban would just be cussing Lane Kiffin up one side and down the other. I mean, it just seemed like they were arguing nonstop. He's been gone from there for a few years, and of course, they're both saying all the right things this week in the press conferences leading up to the games. But you know, each coach wants to beat the other here. Lane Kiffin would love to be the first assistant to beat Nick Saban. Of course, I think is he 30-0 or 22-0 or it's 20-something-0, whatever it is. Nick Saban has never lost to one of his former coaches. I don't expect it to happen this week either. Now, Ole Miss is a 23.5-point underdog at home. Ole Miss is going to score some points on Bama, I think. You might want to consider betting the over in this game, too, if you're into that kind of thing. I tend to focus more on the lines rather than the over-unders. But you can look at the over-under if you want. I think Ole Miss is going to score some points on Bama. Lane Kiffin, I think, is too good of an offensive mind to not find a way to move the ball against that Alabama defense. Now, is it going to be enough to win this game? No. Alabama's way too talented on offense. They're going to run up and down the field on Ole Miss. Probably more so even than Ole Miss has the potential to run up and down the field on Bama. Bama can strike quick. They've got playmaking wide receivers all over the field. Najee Harris is great once you get in the red zone. Hard to believe Najee Harris never scored a touchdown outside the red zone. Maybe that comes to an end this week. Ole Miss defense has been non-existent. I do think Bama wins comfortably by about 3 touchdowns. But 23.5 is more than 3 touchdowns. I'm going to take the home underdog and lay the points. I don't think the game will be close, but 23.5 is a lot of points. Give me the Lane train. All right, and on the SEC Network at 7:30, we have Mississippi State on the road at Kentucky. Kentucky's a 2-point favorite and desperately needs a win. Some people, myself included, were high on Kentucky this offseason. Some people were so high on Kentucky this offseason they were out of their damn mind, like that Mark Rogers fella. Good morning. He picked Kentucky to win the SEC East. They've now started out 0-2. Heartbreaking loss last week to Ole Miss, losing in overtime. Kentucky scored in overtime, missed an extra point. Ole Miss then got the ball, scored, made the extra point, and won. Ole Miss had to score late in the game even to put it into overtime, so just a heartbreaking loss for Kentucky. Terry Wilson's had a problem not turning the ball over, which is something that has lingered with him since he got to Kentucky a couple of years ago. Will we see Joey Gatewood in this game? He's been cleared to play. I don't know. Mississippi State, are they going to look like they looked against LSU in week 1? 600 and something yards passing and 50 something points? Or are they going to look like they looked last week against Arkansas and struggle to move the ball at all? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I feel like I know Kentucky more and who the real Kentucky is than I do the Mississippi State. With that being said, I'm going to take a chance here that the Mississippi State from week 1 shows up, puts up a lot of yards and a lot of points, and Kentucky can't keep up. I like the underdog here. Give me Mississippi State and those 2 points. All right, there you have it. Previews and picks against the spread for all 7 of the SEC games coming up this weekend. We got some great games. I know you guys are going to enjoy them. I am too. Good luck to all your teams this week except Tennessee. And it's nothing personal. You just happen to be playing Georgia, so you have to catch the L. I hope the rest of your teams win. No injuries. Great day of games. I know you're all excited. I am too. I'll be streaming the Georgia game on my live channel. So the link is in the description. It's second channel for live streams. Just click that link. It'll take you to my second channel. Get subscribed over there. I'll be streaming the Georgia-Tennessee game. We'll start the stream around 3:15 or so for the 3:30 kickoff. And you guys can watch me go absolutely nuts for 3 hours while I watch Georgia and Tennessee. The Patreon stream this week will be for the primetime games starting at around 8 o'clock. Appreciate you guys watching and have a good morning.